We have a lot of work to do between now and May 1st. One of the reasons that we expedited this vote on the veto was to have as much time as possible in case there was a veto override, because we need to prepare. People that use rideshare service need to be prepared. Drivers that are employed through rideshare need to be prepared. This is not just about Minneapolis. I think there are repercussions to the entire region where our whole state needs to be prepared. And I'll tell you, my frustration is not around a disagreement on policy. We have disagreements all the time. My frustration is that the data was wholly ignored. They passed a policy about a week ago, knowing full well that the very next day, a statewide study was going to come out that analyzed 18 million rides. They analyzed 0 rides in creating this policy. So the study was wholly ignored. Every attempt to work together and to collaborate was also ignored. You'll note that they passed the exact same rate of pay about 6 months ago, which I vetoed. I immediately got to work providing alternatives, working to compromise, finding common ground, putting forward multiple proposals and willing to compromise because we both want to see the drivers get an increase in pay. Everyone wants to see Uber and Lyft drivers get paid more. But getting a raise doesn't do a whole lot of good if you lose your job entirely. We've got a whole lot of work left to do here before May 1st comes. And we need to be having conversations that are based in reality. The reality is that whenever you create a policy, you have to engage with all of the parties involved, even if you don't necessarily want to, even if you don't agree with them at all. And in this case, that means engaging with people that use rideshare, riders. That means engaging with drivers. And yes, whether you like it or not, you also have to sit down and engage with the rideshare companies themselves. They didn't in creating this policy. They set a figure, they ignored the data, they passed that figure, I vetoed it, now the veto has been overridden, and now we're going to rush to try to find some solutions that are not all evidently there. With that, I'll open it to any questions that you might have.
They don't seem to think that Uber and Lyft will pull up, that it's just a threat. So you think that they will absolutely May 1st, they're gone?
You all have seen the same statements that I've seen. I won't speak on behalf of Uber and Lyft, but they haven't left any wiggle room here. They've made very clear their intentions, and look, if they don't, they will have lied.
And you just mentioned looking at solutions between now and May 1st to get something done. What are the possible solutions that you're looking at?
They're not plentiful. I've heard some people talk about getting a new rideshare company up and running. That is not a thing at the level of service that we need in this short period of time. And so, again, I'm a mayor. I operate in the reality business. And the reality is that the data was ignored. That's the most frustrating part. The state did a great report, analyzing 18 million rides, outlining the base level that would get drivers both a minimum wage and expenses. Expenses like the cost of an automobile and the cost of a cell phone. There's a full range, and if the person who's on the phone could just hit mute, because I just keep hearing the typing in my ear. Thanks. They offered a range as well. The range goes all the way from providing a minimum wage, accounting for expenses, all the way up to the Cadillac version of benefits, from retirement to insurance. And we're provided with data to pass a policy based on the analysis that was done by the state. We should be following what the data says, not simply responding to the politics.
Mayor, the drivers say that this is it's kind of and some members of the council also say it comes down to a matter of moral leadership, that if we're making numbers based on what the rideshare companies want, we're essentially saying we're okay with a bunch of, with low income people of color making crappy wages to do transportation services in the city. And that in arguing against this ordinance, is that what you're saying? Like that we have to be okay with these drivers making a subpar wage or something that only barely covers their expenses or just enough to break even? They say we need more than that.
My moral leadership is based in truth. My moral leadership is telling people, even that are on my side, that I don't necessarily agree with them at times. We need more people that have the courage to tell their own side, their own supporters, what they don't want to hear. I know there's this gravitational pull right now to the extreme in this country, whether that's the far right or the far left. That gravitational pull should not be outdoing the data itself. And in this case, it did. And so, look, this is not an easy thing to do, to step up to veto something, especially when I myself want to see drivers get a significant increase in pay. In getting them a significant increase in pay, we've offered solutions, and I've said very clearly that I would offer solutions in line with the report that was done by the state. It's also important to note, what is the standard? You said, I think, the term crappy wages. Let's get more specific. The state outlined a plan, again, to get drivers both the minimum wage plus expenses, including an automobile and a cell phone, cleaning, a number of other expenses. That figure was at 89 cents per mile, and I believe 49 cents per minute. They offered a range that would get drivers up to a full package of benefits, minimum wage, plus expenses, plus full package of benefits. I believe that figure was at $1.20 and 49 cents. So there's a range that was offered that would allow people a menu almost, policymakers a menu to choose from in the realm of reality. The policy that they passed went well outside that. And again, you don't need to take my word for it. And I say this is media's responsibility here too. It doesn't just need to be a he said, she said. We should be listening to data, report on what the data actually says in the report. They did a great report. We shouldn't be passing policy the day before a report comes out.
Mayor, and I haven't seen it, but they keep referring or saying that this is council, had their own study that had their own data, which was very different than the state data.
Well, let's talk about that study, because I don't think that they're being honest about what the staff actually did. The staff were directed. Staff were directed by the council essentially to take the rate of pay that other cities have passed with regard to Uber and Lyft and calculate out the cost of living and minimum wage here in Minneapolis. They were not asked to evaluate a single ride. The report the state put out analyzed 18 million rides. It's one of the biggest data collections in our country with regard to rideshare. 18 million rides on one side, 0 on the other side. If I'm weighing the two, am I going to pass policy based on 18 million rides on one side or 0 rides on the other? I'm going with 18 million.
Mayor, you said last week that you were optimistic that you could sway some of the council members to vote differently this week, and I think maybe 1 or 2 even voted the other way.
I believe 1.
Yeah.
Koski.
So
lost.
can you talk about what happened and maybe just briefly what those conversations looked like over the last week?
I can't talk about this with any set of confidence because I'm a bit confused as well, at least on one of those votes. Look, I can understand the rationale behind holding a consistent position. In other words, voting yes before and continuing to vote yes now. I can understand the rationale behind voting yes before and then a study came out and you recognize the data actually doesn't support the position I previously took and then having a no position. What I can't understand is voting no before, then having a study that shows that the policy you put out was wrong, and then changing your vote to yes. That doesn't make sense to me.
Would you
Time
support
for
the
two more questions.
Would you support the governor preempting this legislation, or not the governor, but the legislature? The governor raised the possibility of preempting it in some comments yesterday. Do you think that he or the state need to step in here?
I have long been a big proponent of local control. I have long been against state preemption. Even on policies that I disagree with, I have been against state preemption. In this situation, there is a massive impact that will be felt by residents and visitors in Minneapolis. There will be a massive impact that is felt by our region. Picture arriving in Minneapolis from the airport. It's a pretty strong likelihood that to get to where you need to go, you're going to be using 35W or 94. The two major highways in the state go right through Minneapolis. There's a regional impact here, and I'm going to be working with the governor and the legislature to explore what options there are. I'm not going to give you a definitive yet here as to what that exactly looks like, but it's something that I think we all need to be open to exploring. This is an issue. And do we have all of the tools to provide for this very significant gap that could come in our transportation system? We don't. It was the right thing to do to plan ahead to expedite this vote as quickly as possible. And it will be the right thing to do now to figure out how we're able to account for that deficiency. But we got a hell of a lot of work to do.
So what happens if a hotel calls you today and says, hey, what do I do? What do I start telling my guests that are coming to book downtown after May 1st? Or restaurant calls you up. What are you telling them to do?
Well, rhetorically, I would be thinking in my mind, call the council member. I wouldn't say that, though. What I would say is, hey, we're going to work with you to find every possible option to make sure that we've got transportation for you. We'll offer all information that's available as far as public transit and light rail. Hell, we'll probably even provide a city liaison over there at the airport so that people can figure out how to get to where they need to go. These are things I'm just making up on the spot. We don't have all the solutions as of right now. That's why we wanted to expedite this process as much as possible.
Yes.
And for the previous thing was a joke. I've been very unsuccessful with jokes as of late, so I feel like I've got to.
There you go. Get going.
All right, I'll do one more.
Is there a concern for safety? Obviously people are using
Yes.
services to get home from the bars. Is it a concern for safety at that point?
Yes, there's a concern for safety. There's absolutely a concern for safety. We have all had one drink too many and taken an Uber or Lyft home from the bar. Vast majority of us, I would say, have done that before. Why? It's the right thing to do. It makes people on the road safe. It makes yourself safer. Prevents car accidents. But by the way, rideshare is not only used to get drunk people home safely from the bar. It's used by disabled people. It's used by people of lower incomes that don't own an automobile and can't rely exclusively on public transportation. It's used by people that show up at the airport. How many times have you gone to another airport and you're looking at one of three options? Public transit, which you often use, maybe a buddy picks you up, that sometimes happens, or you call an Uber or a Lyft. This is the world we live in right now. And we can improve the world that we live in for the better by, for instance, increasing the wages for drivers. And at the same time, we got to be able to engage all of the parties, which they did not do. And you got to be willing to listen to what the data says, which, simply put, didn't happen. I've talked with the commissioner of the Department of Labor over at the state. She's given a full rundown of what that report says, and the analysis in the report does not support the policy decision that the council made. Again, not my opinion here. Check out the report. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.